Good evening, everybody. I'd like to extend a warm welcome on behalf of SEFA, the Scottish Events and Festivals Association, to this evening's networking event, looking at the very important topic of the value of business tourism in Edinburgh and Scotland. So SEFA, for those of you who aren't aware, is a recently launched organisation. We began our life a year ago today, in May 2013, and our objectives are to be able to accurately measure the performance and therefore the value of the festivals and events industry in Scotland. Also to look at policy and support and to provide a voice for the industry, particularly when strategic decisions are being made that may impact on the tens of thousands of jobs in Scotland that the festival and events industry currently supports. A thriving organisation, however, needs the support of its members. We've recently launched paid membership and are keen to develop and extend our membership so that we can be fully representative and reflect the views of the industry. If you're not already a member, then you can join up here tonight. If you are, thanks for your support, and please spread the word to other colleagues and organisations. Speaking of the value of research, Scottish Tourism Alliance Business Tourism for Scotland Group are in the process of gathering important data to headline the volume and value figured for business tourism to Scotland. BTSG, if you're not aware, have sponsored a Scottish supplement to the Adventure IVCA UK Event Market Trends Survey. And I'm sure that Judy, who's presenting later this evening, will elaborate on this. But if we have any business tourism venues here tonight, if you haven't completed the survey, you now have the opportunity to do so as by demand. The deadline has been extended till tomorrow. So I hope that SEFA members will support this important research. So that's the sale pitch over for now. The format of this evening is that we have three very well respected and knowledgeable speakers who will present insights into the importance and value of business events and tourism. Each speaker will have 15 to 20 minutes with the opportunities for questions at the end of the event. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker. I'm sure it's a gentleman that all of you in the room know. Hans Rissman OBE has over 40 years experience in the hospitality industry. Well, he's obviously most well known in Edinburgh for the position of Chief Executive in this fantastic building since 1993. And in almost 20 years of operation, the EICC have delivered over £400 million of economic benefit to Edinburgh and Scotland, hosted over 2,500 events, and in 2013 welcomed its 1 millionth delegate. Hans has also oversaw the successful launch of the £13 million expansion, which I think he will talk about this evening, and really has consolidated the venue's status as a global leader in event technology and more than doubled the capacity. So a great person to kick off talking about the importance of business tourism. So please welcome Hans to the stage.
Thank you, Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome and good evening to the expanded EICC, and thank you for attending tonight's event. Thomas J. Watson, the former CEO of IBM, said, "Once an organization loses its spirit of pioneering and rests on its early work, its progress stops." This reasoning was very much behind the concept of the EICC expansion, which opened almost a year ago to the day when we welcomed over 700 guests to experience a flavor of what our clients can expect in the future. It was a glittering occasion befitting of a truly splendid addition to Edinburgh's conference and business tourism offering. It was also a proud moment in EICC's rich history to finally see the dream of our additional function space realized. Today I would like to talk about how the expansion complements the foundation of the EICC building and benefits the whole city. But first I would like to take you back 12 months and show you a short clip of our opening ceremony in May 2013. EICC was constructed as part of the Edinburgh Exchange Master Plan to transform a previously derelict brownfield site formerly used as a goods yard for the Caledonian Railway into one of the UK's most vibrant financial quarters. As an integral part of the original landowner group, the EICC Limited was instrumental in driving the development of the master plan. The expansion with the Leonard Street as its heart is the most significant development in the EICC's 19-year history, which, since opening in '95, has generated over £400 million worth of economic benefit to the region. It also is the final piece of the Exchange Master Plan jigsaw. It was back in '92 that the City of Edinburgh Council set the EICC Limited a purpose to construct and operate the EICC and to develop an international business. This was a significant challenge given that the city had never before had an international conference centre and we were entering uncharted territory. This purpose very much underpinned the vision and mission for the future of the organization. Back in '93, we were operating from a small office place in Melville Crescent. We had no clients. We had very few fixed assets. And EICC was still very much a construction project in its early phases. We did, however, have something very important. We had a clear vision of where we wanted to go and what we wanted to become. We were indeed early advocates of thinking with the end in mind. The challenge, however, was to develop the mission, to procure the successful and continued operation of the conference centre in a global marketplace with national and international customers so as to maximize the economic benefit to the city of Edinburgh. It is a combination of non-deviation from the mission and the untwinkling support of the Edinburgh City Fathers, who even back in '92, during a major recession, had the foresight to see the positive economic effects that an international conference centre venue would have upon the region. The EICC officially was opened by Her Majesty the Queen in July '96, leading in a long line of royals, statesmen and business leaders to have graced the EICC through 2 decades in the lead-up to the expansion. As with the original EICC development, the expansion was completed on time, on budget, and no litigation. We remained operational throughout the whole course of the building project as not to jeopardize the continuity of our business success, our compromise Edinburgh's status as a globally recognized centre for conference excellence. And most importantly, we serve the needs of our clients who had already booked their event in advance of the expansion announcement. Managing client expectations is critical to the EICC. So during the construction, much emphasis was placed on a strong, collaborative working relationship between the contractor, Sir Robert McAlpine, and the EICC Client Services team, who worked tirelessly to eliminate any possibility of building work disrupting conference sessions. The new £30 million expansion space features the world's first hall-wide moving floor system, giving event organizer a unique set of event space options that are beyond the reach of conventional halls. Raked auditoria, arenas, and tiered banqueting setups for up to 2,000 people can be delivered in record time in the Lennox Street. The principle behind the EICC expansion is to maximize space by utilizing available technologies. As with the original EICC's revolving auditoria, a unique feature when installed, the flexible moving floor is also one of its kind, consolidating EICC's position at the forefront of global events technology. Examples of the flooring options include a flat floor for exhibitions, tiered banquets accommodating up to 700 guests, a raked auditorium for 2,000 people, and an arena with room for 1,400 delegates. The space can also be used for in-the-round events, such as boxing and snooker. It also provides opportunities for EICC to expand its offering as a festival venue, as well as hosting music events and concerts. The uniqueness and flexibility of the expansion is EICC's response to the needs of our own clients, as well as the views of 700 European events managers in a pan-European study that concluded an increased demand for exhibition and flexible multi-purpose space. We listened, we understood, and we responded to our clients by delivering a product that has been designed to build to exceed the expectations of our most discerning customers for its aesthetics, its unique features, its flexibility, and its functionality. The new development also addresses an expanding global events market showing sustained growth year by year. The EICC also needed to grow to meet the demand or risk losing a significant percentage of its repeat business, in many cases conferences with increasing delegate numbers. As much of our business is of a repeat nature, it was necessary to make measures to avoid losing these key clients. Also to be considered was the increasing competitive threat, particularly from emerging overseas markets, as well as the rise in conference venues in the UK. The expansion provides us with a tremendous opportunity to target more international events that we are unable to attract in the past. It also enables us to regain events that had previously been held here at the EICC but outgrown the previous building. After nearly 12 months of operation, the expansion is meeting all expectations. Just after our opening ceremony, over 2,500 delegates attended the International Investigative Dermatology Conference, organized over a 7-day period in May 2013. The client and delegate feedback was extremely positive, with conference organizer Chris Garrett saying, "The space proved to be invaluable." The organizers were so pleased that they have booked their annual meeting for 900 delegates over 5 days in July 2018. And the demand for using the new space is growing as word spreads across the global events market, with the potential of bringing even more vital economic impact well into the future. In September 13, the European Space Agency Living Planet Symposium attracted over 1,800 delegates for an 8-day duration and was estimated to deliver an economic impact of almost £3.9 million to Edinburgh and Scotland. Again, the client was delighted in prompting the conference directorate to state that the overall management of the event was excellent. The ESA conference was also marked by a key milestone for the EICC with the attendance of our 1 millionth delegate, prompting the Scottish Government's Minister for Energy, Enterprise and Tourism, Fergus Ewing, to say, "Business tourism is a crucial sector of the Scottish tourism industry. For the EICC to have attracted 1 million business tourists to Scotland is a major achievement, and I congratulate them. These high numbers of visitors bring economic benefits to the area and provide an opportunity for international delegates to interact with like-minded Scottish businesses and academic institutions. Between 20th and 26th of October, we welcomed 850 delegates for the Linux Foundation's Automotive Summit, bringing developers from all around the world to Edinburgh. The expansion also provided the capacity to comfortably accommodate 1,700 dinner guests at the Scottish Business Awards in June 13, featuring President Bill Clinton as the keynote speaker. This was the largest indoor banquet to be held in Scotland since the court of King James VI, and that's a wee while ago. This year, the Scottish Business Awards returns to the EICC for what promises to be another magnificent evening with Sir Richard Branson addressing the audience. These conferences are an indication of how the additional functional space has increased EICC's adaptability and capacity to stage a series of events across the spectrum of business and association markets, and the ability to meet the needs of delegates from far and wide. However, these levels of service delivery must be maintained. To ensure this, we work within an excellence framework towards 7 quality standards. The attainment of such acclaimed standards to the highest level, including investors in people, hospitality assured, ISO 14001, ISO 9001, Green Business Tourism Scheme, and excellence through people help cement the excellence culture throughout the fabric of the EICC. Our quality standards are an integral part of who we are, and it is through the entire EICC team that quality is conveyed to our clients. All of our quality standards fall under the umbrella of the EFQM model, the European Foundation for Quality Business Management. We were the first conference centre in the world to win this award, succeeding in 2 categories. For the highest scoring SME in our group, and for development and involvement of people. Involvement of people is vital to their development at the EICC, and as Benjamin Franklin, one of the founding fathers of the United States, says, "Tell me and forget. Tell me and I forget. Teach me and I may remember. Involve me and I learn." It was very much this philosophy of involvement that led to each and every EICC team member, as well as our in-house business partners, to receive comprehensive training in Franklin Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, to help take the team onto the next level of our pursuit of excellence and remain lean in an extremely competitive global market. Training is a vital component of the EICC and vital to our success. A finance director of a FTSE 100 company once asked the CEO, "What happens if we invest in developing our people and they leave us?" The CEO responded with, "What happens if we don't and they stay?" The expansion provides a massive boost to Edinburgh as a business tourism destination, allowing for longer duration of international events, bringing greater delegate numbers. This has helped push the economic impact measure past the previous high in 2012 of 35.6 million. In 2013, EICC delivered a record of 50.4 million to the city and the region through the spending power of those international business tourists attending major conferences here at the EICC. The additional function space is a boost, allowing the EICC even greater opportunities to attract more and larger international events to Edinburgh. With a £2.3 billion return forecast over the next 30 years, the EICC is truly defining city centre conference and events space. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening to me.
insight into the value of business tourism. Some really interesting case study material there, and what a brilliant flagship for Edinburgh. So now our next speaker is John Donnelly. John is Chief Executive of Marketing Edinburgh, assuming the role in July 2013. And he's responsible for the running of the body created to promote Edinburgh as a destination to the world. Prior to this, his most recent role was as Commercial Director for Glasgow 2014, where his responsibilities included developing and launching sponsorship, merchandising and ticket sales strategies for the Games. Prior to joining Glasgow 2014, John has worked within 3 integrated agencies, 2 in London and 1 in Edinburgh as Managing Director, with clients including Coca-Cola, Peugeot, Unilever, and significant achievements include launching Tea in the Park here in Scotland. So we'd like to invite John now to the stage. Thank you.
Evening. Thank you for inviting me to this event. I was a bit sort of coerced into doing it by Alison, so I hope it's worthwhile. I've been asked to talk around business events, and basically I really asked 3 questions to directly address, which is what I've done, which is what constitutes a business event, what's the importance and value of the sector, and what are the industry misconceptions that surround business tourism. I've sort of framed that, however, I'm going to talk a little bit about, it's not a little bit, we're pleased to hear about Marketing Edinburgh, in order to context what it is we do in this space. I think I'd also like to dwell slightly at the end, is talk about some of the future challenges I think business event and business tourism faces, which hopefully you'll find of interest. As Alison said, we're the organisation that's here to promote the city to the world. It sounds quite grand, and it's a terrific product we're actually selling. We sell across a number of different spaces, not just business tourism, we do leisure tourism, we do film, we do brand. And it's really under the 5 different agendas that the City of Edinburgh Council, who are our principal funder, have, which is making Edinburgh a world-class destination in which to visit, invest, live, work and study. So I guess that's broadly what Marketing Edinburgh do, but in the context of this sort of brief conversation, it's more at Marketing Edinburgh's Convention Bureau, which sits within Marketing Edinburgh. What the Convention Bureau does, it goes to market to sell to business tourism, national and international conferences, coming to venues like the EICC and the other conference venues throughout the city. It's what we do. And what we do, and Hans touched on it, and I hope it's not death by numbers, there's a few numbers that I'll throw at you as well as we go through this, but it's what we're going to try and do and how we're measured is generating economic impact for the city, principally. But also we've got 180 members who pay in to Marketing Edinburgh and they benefit from business tourism coming to town. And that's people like conferences, people like the hotels, people like AV companies. So we have to deliver value back to our members, and that's part of our role in the business tourism space. So, as background, to get to the first question that we're asked is, what constitutes a business event? It's a really bizarre question because there's no one answer. It depends who you ask, this is what the answer is. ICA, which is the International Congress and Convention Association, they're sort of an industry body. What they do is they rank cities according to their sort of attractiveness to bring conferences to the cities. What they say is a business event or a meeting for business tourism is that it rotates between a minimum of 3 countries, it occurs regularly, and there's an attracting a minimum of 50 participants. That's their view of what a business event is. Now you talk to British Meetings and Events Industry Survey, which is published every year by an organisation called CAT, they define it as somebody with 8 people occupying a venue outside their own premises, at least for 4 hours, with the duration of a day. Again, very different to ICA. And then you look at the UK Economic Impact Study, again, some of these hands touched on, we'll talk about, again, a minimum of 10 participants over a minimum of 4-hour duration, and a venue where payment per transactions take place. Now, all of that, I think, is really unsatisfactory, because what it doesn't do is give you an international benchmark in which you can measure your performance in reality against that of another city or another country. It's quite confusing. There is no international standard, and it's something we'll touch on a bit further on. So that's what these people define a business event, a business tourism to be. So if that's what it is, going to the second question, the importance of business events. Why are they important? Well, they are important. A lot of the stuff that Hans talked around demonstrates just how important business tourism is. There's not a whole bunch of different other stats that surround the business tourism to the UK is worth 3 times the GDP of agriculture. It's worth 1 million full-time jobs. It's a big ticket. If you drive it down into the Scottish level, it's worth £1.9 billion worth of economic impact to Scotland annually. And to put that in terms of multipliers, that is the equivalent of 18 Six Nations tournaments, or go back to Theme Park, 27 Theme Parks every year. So it's kind of important. It drives a lot of money, drives a lot of revenue, it drives a lot of jobs. Going back to the ICA piece in terms of Edinburgh as a city, we're 33rd in the world, the 31st most desirable destination to run a conference in the world. And that's a good number. We're second only in the UK behind London. We've still got a long way to go, 33rd. But the other area I think it's important we'll dwell on and touched on in some of Hans' areas, and I've actually touched on it, is about the impact that business tourism can have beyond just financial impact. And I think a good place to look at is the recent development in Liverpool down at the Albert Docks. Without a doubt, their version of the EICC, the conference centre and exhibition area, were the catalyst for the regeneration of that entire area. It's a bit like the 90s pictures that Hans was putting on there. Without the EICC, this entire area would not be as it is. It can be a jumping off point, a springboard for massive economic development and return for the city. So I think that's really important. I think the second area is around that of economic benefits such as year-round jobs. There's a potential for further future investment. Business delegates come to Edinburgh, they'll come to places like the EICC, they'll have a great time, they'll see the city, they'll meet like-minded people. A number of them come back and set up businesses as a result, or encourage their colleagues to come and do the same. There's also a sort of long legacy tale around business tourism which can help, and that's to do with leisure tourism. 40% of delegates that come to the city believe they'll come back as a leisure tourist. So there's a long tail there, which is important. I think the other area that's not forgotten about is it showcases the city terrifically well. It creates adverts that you can't buy, and we certainly can't make because we don't have the budget. It's a terrific showcase for the city. It also puts places like university departments and scientists on a global scale. So beyond just the economic impact, I think there's a number of other areas that why business events and tourism is extraordinarily important. But there are a lot of smoke and mirrors that surround business tourism. One of the ones we touched on, I think there is a misunderstanding about the true value of business tourism. I don't know if you picked up this week, there's something called 2014 Business for Events that was launched. It's a government initiative. And basically what they're doing is encouraging both broadcast, digital and print media to shed a bit more light on the true importance of business tourism to the UK, and clearly that's of interest to us. That lack of the sort of standard and what it equates to a business event does hold us back. But one of the things that's been very positive recently is government input beyond just studies. The Scottish Government's National Bid Support Fund, in which we'll touch on a little bit later around subvention money, shows the importance that the government are now placing in business tourism. I think a second misconception is that business tourism is all about venues and facilities and where meetings take place. It's not. It's a lot more than that. It's about the people who benefit from it on a much broader and deeper basis. There's a large footprint of business tourism outside the venue, and that's everything from the florist, the coffee shop, the taxis. Many people don't believe they're involved in business tourism, which again I think is another misconception. In most places in Edinburgh, for example, it's commercial will be involved in some shape or form with business tourism. The reality is we can all get a share of it when it comes to time. Another piece, I think from a misconception point of view, is the difference between business tourism and leisure tourism. A lot of people just bundle it together as tourism, but there are actually clear blue water between the two. Some of the multiples that surround a business tourist versus a leisure tourist are very interesting. 1.5 times the amount of money that's spent by a business tourist in an overnight stay versus a leisure tourist, the more high-end, high yield, and that's important. But coming with more spend comes more demands. Business tourism are very demanding. We'll touch on some of the challenges I think all you face around that. And if right down to the very basics, free Wi-Fi that's the ticket to the game. It's not a big tick, and they expect it. It's actually one of the things, like all the research we do for events that come to the city, it's what's your greatest sense of frustration as a delegate? I can't get Wi-Fi working this time. And I don't know if you're aware, Edinburgh's about to go Wi-Fi throughout the entire city. It's one of the first cities in the UK as of the end of July, in time for the festivals. So hopefully that problem goes away. So, the last thing I want to talk about as a misconception is that maybe 10 to 15 years ago, decisions were made by organisers of which city puts to place their conference was all based on it's a nice place to go, it's cool, it's sex, it's fun. That's all still stands, but at the very end of that sentence is another few words which say, and how much money are you going to give me to come to your city, to come to your venue, which links back into the whole subvention piece. And we can't go away from that because it's very important, and we'll talk about now, I think, the challenges. Before we do that is the true value of all of that. Now, the little quote up there is from a professor, Brian Austin, of Stirling University. He's one of our ambassadors. We run an ambassador programme as Marketing Edinburgh. We will work with academics, say in life sciences or across the piece, to help be ambassadors and a frontman to help bring a conference to town. And they brought two very relatively modest conferences into the city. And in that quote, you won't see anything about a pound sign in there. What you will see is about, as a result, a benefit of that conference coming here was about a new platform being engaged, a new network being engaged for that particular area. And they talk about an exchange of ideas. So that, beyond just the money side of things, is again another benefit of the true value of what can be brought as a result of business tourism. But if you want some hard numbers, our financial year as Marketing Edinburgh Convention Bureau finished up at the end of March 2014. We delivered economic impact to the city of conferences of £90.1 million, up from 75 in 12-13. Of 90, 55 of that will be as a result of conferences go through the EICC. And so we're delighted with that. But it's not getting any easier. And I think the challenges we do as business tourism, as we as Marketing Edinburgh, shouldn't be shunned. We have to be aware of them. A lot of noises coming out of the city, all very positive, and that's all very good. But complacency has to be our enemy. And I think there's a number of challenges which we shouldn't forget. Hans mentioned competition. Competition is fierce to bring business tourism to cities. There's a lot of emerging markets. We lost a conference to Lithuania because Lithuanians would give it up for free, not going to charge them to come. There's a lot of emerging countries throwing a lot of money at a conference because of the value, the benefits it can bring. The three specific ones I think that relate to Scotland, and they're not going away anytime soon. One is cost. Scotland and the UK particularly are seen as expensive places to come to run conferences. And that's venue cost, that's transport cost, it's travel cost, it's APD. There's a lot of barriers in place to people coming here. Cost is an important one of those. The survey was done and it said it was up to 57% cheaper to run a conference in continental Europe than it is to run in the UK, particularly London, obviously. So again, it's something we need to be aware of. Price is important to people. Something that's a bit more subtle that will require some government change. There's one, again, that does have an impact, it's that of visa controls. We're not the easiest country to get into from an international delegate point of view. Free movement through borders helps bring conferences. Again, a UNESCO tourism report, and this is a shocker, the UNESCO tourism report stated the UK was out of 139, 136 of the worst people from a welcoming process to bring delegates into their country through visa control. It's a big issue. People don't come for that reason alone. And the last piece, without banging the drum too much, is subvention funding. Scotland is well off the pace compared to other countries with regard to subvention funding. The fact that there's money in there now is a step forward, but it's well off the pace when you consider it to places like Paris or Vienna or Berlin, the money they can track down. So it's something we need to work around. So that very quickly is, I hope I've answered the 3 questions that they asked me to answer, and just a little view on, I think, some of the challenges within that area that we do need to address. So I want to thank you for the opportunity. I'm happy to take any questions when we do the roundtable conversation, so thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, John. I think that was a very realistic overview of business tourism, and I'm sure that he wasn't really coerced to come and speak this evening. So, moving on to our final speaker, it's Judy Ray, and Judy is Head of Corporate Events at Glasgow Science Centre. Since the pre-launch of the £73 million international attraction for Scotland, she's been responsible for the vision, creation and execution of the corporate event experience at the Science Centre, which so far has generated over 15 million for the sector in Scotland. Judy is a highly motivated business development leader, experienced in both the private and public sector within the business tourism industry in Scotland. And in her career to date, she's headed up sales and convention teams at Greater Glasgow and Clyde Valley Convention Bureau, Kingdom of Fife, and previously business development roles at Glasgow University Concord Services and the Turnberry Hotel. Judy is also STA's champion for business tourism and leads the Business Tourism for Scotland group. So hopefully today she'll give us an insight into how that group is working and also her own experience of business tourism. Thank you, Judy.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Jane. Just move all the equipment down here. For those of you who don't know Glasgow Science Centre, as Jane alluded there, my responsibility is not for the visitor attraction side, but very much the income generation side. And in recent years, as budgets have been reduced, we've had to look at income generating streams. So we focus on both the business tourism aspect as well as events. So I really feel tonight I can stand on both the events and festivals as well as business tourism. But really my role tonight is to try and give you an insight into the Business Tourism for Scotland initiative and industry group that we're working on, what it means to us as a group, how that kind of communicates itself across the piece to yourselves, and how we can collaboratively work together, because as John and Hans have both alluded to, collaboration I think is genuinely the most important thing that we've got as an opportunity to drive that growth for Scotland. But if I can take ourselves back just a couple of years to 2012, when from a purely personal perspective, I genuinely felt there was a step change when it came to looking at the whole tourism sector in Scotland, because a number of things happened at that time. One of the things was that the new Tourism Scotland 2020 strategy was launched, and that followed a fairly rigorous review of the previous strategy. And like all strategies, it looked at what worked, what didn't work, what would you do differently to make better inroads. And there was a couple of things which really forced me to put my head above the parapet, which was, for it to work and to have traction going forward, it needed to have greater ownership by the industry, by all of us in this room and beyond in Scotland. So it was a strategy that had ownership by industry, it was going to be led and delivered by industry, and that was very attractive to me, because as a venue, sometimes you get lost in the mix of convention bureaus doing their stuff, or the National Agency Business Tourism Unit doing very great jobs, but if you're a smaller player, your voice isn't always heard. So here's an opportunity I saw for business tourism. But as important, and I think this was a real step change, was that the ownership to deliver that saw the launch of the Scottish Tourism Alliance. And that was headed up by two very passionate, enthusiastic business professionals, and Stephen Leckie was the chair, and Mark Crothall, who's here tonight, as the chief exec, both of whom brought great leadership and great vision of how that strategy could be delivered. Because in their responsibility and remit, they had to lead that. But that was launched, and it gave a context of what was going to help drive that economic growth. And some of the findings were that let's sweat the assets that Scotland have got, and they identified 4 assets in terms of tourism, 4 specific assets. Now there are other assets, but the 4 things that they had identified were yourselves: the events and festivals, business tourism, destinations, towns and cities, and nature, heritage and activities. So those 4 assets were given kind of key focus of how they could drive economic growth. But on top of that, the strategy identified capabilities. We all have capabilities in our teams of how we want to deliver growth, but it was very clear what they wanted to do. They suggested we needed to look at the quality. John alluded to it earlier on. Quality is key, be it with your people, be it when you're putting things forward from a marketing perspective, looking at the sustainability, how we all look at that from a quality perspective, and leadership and collaboration. So that was a document that was laid out for Mark and Stephen to drive with industry. And that was when the game change, in my opinion, really happened. Because suddenly there was an organisation, like any new organisations, that were given a framework and a focus in which to hang their hats and deliver this economic growth. And like any new organisation, I'm sure Mark will be the first one to identify challenges he had, because it didn't have any traction. There had been a small membership, but he's grown the membership considerably in the last 2 years. And the last count, I think, is over 225 members that they have who are organisations or associations or businesses that make up the tourism product in Scotland. But it also had a framework that gave us accountability, gave ownership, so that if when we were being asked to identify where the growth was, and say in 2020, there was a board, a council, a leadership group, and the business tourism asset fell within that. So we had accountability from a business tourism perspective as well. And as important, industry knows we can't do this alone. John has alluded to the fact that subvention is an issue for conferences in Scotland. So we needed to have the support of both the private and public sector to drive that, and we had that within the STA. The vision of the STA is very important because I think, without fail, all the asset groups are trying to emulate this, but in their own respective ways, is to make Scotland a destination of first choice. It seems an easy thing to say, but actually, again, as both Hans and John have said tonight, competition is fierce, so we needed to be able to stand ourselves out from the crowd. Look at that high quality, value for money, and the memorable, authentic customer experiences. Again, things that we all talk about and try and emulate, but very difficult. But the STA were putting it out there from the outset. That's where they were going to be delivering, and hopefully within the groups and within the framework achieving that. So, how does Business Tourism for Scotland Industry Group fit into that, and where is its role? Hans talked about his new development being the final jigsaw in the vision that happened here at the EICC. I saw the Business Tourism for Scotland Industry Group being one of the integral jigsaw pieces in the business tourism product that is Scotland. We already had a very successful, and still do have through Visit Scotland BT unit, a dedicated, very professional, successful team of people who are already delivering both from a marketing and sales perspective. And we already had very successful convention bureaus in the 4 cities. But where, as a professional looking in on that, if you weren't part of one of those 2 areas, your voice wasn't being heard. So suddenly we had that circle being joined with the industry. And we're not wanting to take the place of BTU. They have been incredibly supportive, but we're not them. We're not one of the city bureaus, we are industry. And we're made up of a group of, in total, 12 people, predominantly business people who both have a geographical as well as a cross-section within the industry responsibility, who either have a strategic responsibility, sales and marketing, but as important are at the core face of business tourism. So they understand what the customers are looking for, they understand the challenges the customers get when they come to Scotland, and they have credibility in terms of years of experience and knowledge to actually make it happen. And we are just a group of people who are supported by our stakeholders, but it became very clear last year that while we had this great knowledge and this great skill set in the room, what we didn't have was capability to actually deliver on a regular basis, because we were tied up in our own day jobs, but needed to have something or somebody that could help drive that. And we were very fortunate in being able to secure a project manager. And Sue Crossman is here tonight, and she joined the Business Tourism for Scotland group and is our project manager, and is an absolute stalwart in terms of being the glue and the thread that I think straddles both the STA, the industry group, and the industry as a whole. So that was very important. And those 4 logos there are kind of the partnership of what's going on within business tourism for Scotland. The DNA of the group, again, as Hans and John have alluded to, we all know who works and what makes up business tourism. They're the key areas of business and operations that are part and reflected in the group. What do? We do a number of things, some of which are up on the board just now, but I would suggest as we evolve we will get involved in more things, but there's three things that we do, I think we are focusing on at the moment. One is, and I think this is really, really important, we are that voice for industry. The voice in terms of a collective voice around that table, that group of people. Industry players who are wanting to feed into us in terms of a two-way street, so that while we can communicate challenges and frustrations or routes to market opportunities or intelligence, we are trying to engage in a way that hasn't been done before, in a more impartial sort of way. And I think the other thing that Jane alluded to earlier on, one of the things that we can help in a really tangible way is support credible and reliable data and research work that will help inform all our businesses that operate in business tourism, where the areas of growth are, what the customers are currently looking at, what the trends are, and the volume and value. And it's one of these kind of double-edged swords. We all, from time to time, get asked for data, research and information. We're always too busy to give that information. And as John said, unless we have benchmark figures, how can we judge how successful we are? So we see one of the opportunities within the industry group to actually drive that. But how do we define business tourism? It's interesting, John also mentioned that in his talk. We are, the acronym MICE is, I think, just absolutely sums it up. Within the group, we focus on the meetings, incentive, the convention and exhibition industry as far as Scotland is concerned. What we're not, and I think that's very important, although these areas here work incredibly successfully, we're not an individual business traveller, i.e. coming through from Glasgow today. We don't classify ourselves as part of that. Major events, while hugely successful for Scotland, it's not part of the business tourism remit. Leisure groups or wedding business, all of which some of the suppliers who actually deliver business tourism will benefit from, but that's not part of the overall business tourism. And the service providers, as we've looked at and you've heard earlier on today from John, are the key players and businesses that work with the convention bureaus and the convention centres and the other areas to actually make it all happen and bring it alive. But the other thing that the Business Tourism Industry Group is all about, which I actually think is where the really exciting thing starts to happen, and again John picked it up in his presentation, is that we see it as a great opportunity within the group. Collectively, we can access and lever potential communication with players within the business environment that we couldn't do individually. For example, within Scottish Government or Scottish Enterprise, there are business operators or leaders within their field who we as individuals knocking on that door saying, can we speak to your director who's in charge of, say, life sciences or something. We probably as individual players wouldn't have that opportunity. But as an industry group, we can help lever, hopefully, access to these people with those groups of organisations that you see there. And with that becomes, opportunities arise, synergy takes place. The business extenders, we can be given different opportunities there, and we can discuss infrastructure in a way that we haven't done before. So that's the exciting bit, and it takes time, and it's all about credibility, but I think the industry group will work towards that. And like the STA, their vision, our vision is not dissimilar. It is making Scotland, in terms of business tourism environment, first choice from the conference buyer's perspective. But as important is looking at that economic growth, how it will lever potential investment opportunities across the growth sectors in Scotland, because there are phenomenal growth sectors there. And we want to be seen also as a sector that does use innovation as a way to lever our customers to come to Scotland. And it's interesting, from Glasgow's perspective, I'm based down at just opposite the SECC, And when the Hydro announced that the MTV awards were coming, we thought that's great. It's not going to impact tremendously on the Science Centre, but how wrong we were, because on the back of that award ceremony are 8 different business tourism conferences. And once we got discussing with the organisers in New York and London the potential of that, suddenly we're looking at a site on the Pacific Quay where the Science Centre is next door to the BBC, where we're going to brand it in a way in the evening that we would never have done before. So it's how you can be innovative with your product on your own doorstep, and that's where we like to help lead by example from the group. And also we talk about it, but the authentic experiences are so important. We need to look at how we differentiate ourselves. And I think Scotland has a great reputation, but how can we be presenting the Scottish experience in the 21st century and looking at how we can engage that with our people? Our mission, not dissimilar to Hans, interesting, and I'm delighted to see that, is that we want business tourism to be seen as the UK leader in terms of the voice on the global conference and meetings industry, because we believe passionately that we have a very credible, very successful business tourism sector already before the industry group came along. So we want that elevated and let people from a global perspective come to Scotland and see that we are leading and being trailblazing. And the most important thing, obviously, is sustainable economic growth, and that is the bottom line thing for all our businesses, regardless if you're in the industry group or not. This is the real challenge and the elephant in the room that John alluded to as well, which is credible benchmarking data. Obviously our aim is to grow business tourism. We want to reflect that in our delegate numbers and the regions, but what is that figure we're wanting to grow it from and to? And that's part of the challenge that the industry group has got. I'll talk about the research later on, but to date we have started that process. Last year we came together, as I say, as an industry group with those groups of players around the table, and we wanted to basically, I guess, lay the foundations on how we could actually sustainably look at what was needed against where we want to be the end game in 2020. So we established our identity, and you can see it, Business Tourism for Scotland. It is what it says on the tin. It's clear, it's fresh, and it's to the point. But we're not, as I say, Visit Scotland or Convention Cities. We are an industry group. We wanted, from the outset, to be open and transparent with our stakeholders, and we put out a stakeholder paper which said, based on where we're looking at it, this is how we see Visit Scotland, Scottish Enterprise, and some of the key agencies, how they would work with us as an industry to drive that. So we had clarity at the outset, knowing exactly where the stakeholders viewed it. So then we had a starting point where we could work from to achieve that growth. Sue has done a sterling job in trying to engage more on the regional basis with businesses that are actively engaged in business tourism, because some of them don't have, it's becoming more prevalent, but some of them don't have active convention bureaus that can actually do the bidding for them. So it's beginning to make those connections, working with accessing the economic sector industry leadership groups through Scottish Enterprise and Scottish Government, which collectively we didn't have an opportunity to do before. One of the group members was able to feed into the research work on the international competitiveness of the UK in terms of UK events. So again, a Scottish voice at a national table. Supporting Visit Scotland with the National Bid Fund, which, as John said, it's vital that we need to look at how we can, everybody sees opportunities. If you can do match funding, you can get business in. And started in a very just low way to look at social media activity. That will become more prevalent in year 2. But Sue again has set up a LinkedIn page for the Business Tourism Industry Group. I've done a webinar, so beginning to create a bit of a buzz around what we do. So the focus this year, really March now to March 15, for me it's very much to make it happen, bring it alive and start communicating that to the wider audience and how it's going to impact on them and what we can do to help drive that economic growth. And what we've tried to do, because we are just a small group of players, is I felt it was better if we could structure subgroups who would take initiative in certain areas. So we have a working group that is looking at the comms and engagement strategy that's going to help that two-way communication that I alluded to earlier on and the voice of industries to take place. A website has now been developed, will sit alongside the parent page of Scottish Tourism Alliance, so we're hoping it will have a go-to kind of feel about it from industry. We're wanting to develop further the regional and rural activities, because it's not just about the 4 successful cities. Of course they are there, and they're trailblazers and set great examples, but it's an all-encompassing thing. One of the very exciting initiatives, which I think could only happen because of the industry group, is a new product, and it's a national product taken from the template of the Academic Ambassadors Group. We're looking at a corporate champions initiative, which is essentially allowing corporate buyers or corporate delegates who come to Scotland or who have an affiliation with Scotland to, as that title says, think Scotland, think conferences. They don't necessarily want to run a conference, they don't necessarily want to get involved in a bigger way, but we want them to feel there is a route to market through this initiative where they can come to Scotland with their conference. So that will be launching later on, and again we've got a really great subgroup that is heading that up, so that we're covering everything from what the KPIs are, what the marketing material is, so that it is a holistic joined up thing. Supporting obviously Visit Scotland with the whole National Bid Fund, because again we need to keep that at the forefront of people, that there are opportunities. If you have a conference, think Scotland. And the big one is the volume and value. And as John has alluded as well to the price tag that is attached to the events industry in the United Kingdom. These figures were released at Confex this year. And this is basically part of the Britain's Visits and Events Partnership, BVEP, and they looked at the whole economic impact and the economy of events into the UK. Now, from Business Tourism in Scotland's perspective, the MICE grouping, that's worth £32 billion. Now, I appreciate that's UK, but think about that from the Scottish perspective. From the Events and Festivals Association, that's worth £3.5 billion. So we're incredibly lucky in this room. We all work in a business environment that is already very successful. We need to hone that in Scotland to make it better. The Scottish value figure, Sue will reinforce this. She tears her hair out because she's desperate to try and get credible data and information that allow us to have a benchmark figure that says the value is worth X in 2014, by 2020 will have grown it by Y, therefore the economic growth for Scotland through business tourism is Z. Now unfortunately we haven't got an audited figure that we are all signing up to, and that's going to be one of the key strands of activity this year within the industry group to achieve that. But there are 2 figures kicking around at the moment. One of them, Neil at the BT unit anecdotally spoke to the 4 cities and convention bureaus and said, how much do you generate in terms of business tourism? And without any audited figures, came back very quickly 1.1 billion. And from an events and festivals perspective, that value equates to your 18 Six Nation Championships, your 2017 the Parks, 37 Hogmanay Fest celebrations, 8 Edinburgh Festival Fringes, and 27 military tattoos every single year. So you can see it's a heady figure, and there's opportunities to grow that. That's where we're at now, anecdotally. So that's why it's really important for us to be credible. Remember what I said, the game change was that the strategy for 2020, it was about ownership and delivery by industry. So we want to be credible and be able to, with Mark, say to the Minister of Tourism in 2020, we have grown our particular asset by, but we need to be clear on what that asset figure is. So the benchmarking is taking place, as I say, this year. And I know there's a survey that's been put out to businesses, some of the businesses in this room as well, where it will give us the volume and value. The economic impact study was also handled by MPI and released in 2013. It looked at the value to Scotland, but like all data, unfortunately, the response wasn't as full as we'd hoped it to be. However, the figure that we talk about is 1.9 billion. So looking at that figure and looking at the work that's been done as part of the UK Events Market Survey, hopefully we'll have those findings in 2014. we as an industry group will be able to come out and say, we are taking a stance, based on this evidence, this is where we're going to be hanging our hat on, so to speak. So the value of business tourism in Scotland will be this, and we see opportunities of growth of that. And that actually, I think, is very, very important, because it's going to give us all a target, KPIs that we can start working towards and be accountable with. But as important tonight, it was looking at working with other asset groups and other ways of synergy to drive that economic growth. And going forward, I just think it's such an exciting time for all of us, not just in this room, but the other asset groups within the STA. We collectively all do, hopefully, a good job of what we're about. But I think with having a kind of a framework that STA gives us all, we can look at not having duplication of efforts, duplication of marketing plans or budgets. We can become much stronger. And from the industry group's perspective for business tourism, already we see events and festivals being a key route for us to look at becoming more efficient. Visit Scotland have merged the business tourism unit with Events Scotland, so clearly our national tourist board sees the value of events and business tourism. The UK players as well, they see the value. So for me, it's to start the conversation after tonight. And thank you for letting me come along and just to share what we're trying to do, because it will be a slow process, but I think we all have the same objective, which is to drive business to our own individual businesses, but ultimately to Scotland. So I hope that's given you an insight into how the industry group works. I think we're having questions now for the entire panel, but if anybody wants to catch up with anything that we're doing, I'm certainly around for the rest of the evening. But thank you very much for giving me the opportunity of just sharing our vision.
Okay, thank you, Judy. I think some really interesting figures there in terms of the value. And I know we do have somebody from the military tattoo in the audience, so there might be a question there around those figures. So I'd like to invite 3 speakers to come to the front. And then really, it's now time for people in the audience. It's over to you in terms of asking some any questions, making any comments. And if you just ask that when you ask a question, you just introduce yourself in terms of your name and your organisation, and if there's one particular person you're directing your question at. So who would like to ask the first question? This is like when we do our lectures, when we ask people to ask a question. And I do know we have some students in the audience, and maybe I'll ask one of them to ask a question.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Good evening. Nick Davis, Scottish Chambers of Commerce and Entrepreneurial Spot, business mentor, ex-international hotelier and tourism expert around the world. All speakers tonight have spoken about the value. The number one asset in any business is its staff. 40 years ago, as a trainee hotelier in southern Germany, the bar manager drove a Ferrari. His 2 daughters were at finishing school. He was treated as an utter professional with inside his trade. Is there still a danger in Scotland that we are not giving people who come into the hospitality, the events, the leisure sectors true recognition that the industry is their future and not just a stopgap job?
Okay, who'd like to pick up on that one? So in terms of the value of skills and education within the sector. Hans?
Maybe I should come in here as an ex-hotelier and being a hospitality industry person like you for a long time, and having trained on the continent, the scars on my behind are still there. I remember chefs who were throwing pots around, restaurant managers who abused people, etc., etc. And when I said to my mother when I was 14 that I wanted to become a hotelier, she threw up her arms in horror and said, "No, it's far too far, a hard job for you. You know, go to commercial college, become a banker or an industrialist, and then we'll see." I left commercial college at 17 and a half, and I still said I wanted to become a hotelier, where a commercial college threw up their arms and said, you know, it's far too hard a job for a young man to do. But we have come along, having said that, training was hard in these days, and we cannot treat people, especially young people, like that. It's a much different kind of young person today as it was when you and I were training. And we have come a long way in Scotland with regards to training. I remember the Hotel and Catering Training Board in the early 70s, where we paid contributions, and where we paid contributions to visit Scotland. If we didn't train, you know, we didn't get any subsidies, etc. So we have come a long way where we train people, and we had to train people in the olden days in order to be recognized and have a license to operate. And that's the way it should be. But colleges have also come along. I used to be chairman of the bursaries committee of Hospitality Industry Trust, where we helped young people who went to college. We had, these days, 44 colleges or departments of catering in 44 colleges. And we helped people to complete their courses because they jumped off because of bad publicity from the parents, really. The parents knew how difficult our industry is. However, we don't work 25 hours a day anymore and 7 days a week as we used to do. It's much more regulated, and our pay has come up tremendously from over the last few years. And what we try to demonstrate to people, especially to young people, is there's no such thing as a poor hotelier. We have plenty of examples in our industry, in this country, that you can make it. You can make it in this industry if you have got the passion for service, the recognition for efficiency, and trying to please, making people proud of Scotland.
Okay, I think just picking up on where Hansen said, I know Mark and the leadership group within the STA, it's one of you're absolutely right, one of the things in the vision was to be delivered by skilled and passionate people. And one size doesn't fit all, and certain colleges, universities are already doing that in their own way, but what the work of the leadership group is trying to do is work at how best that they can get that communication across at an entry level as well as from an academic level as well. You're right, and it's something I'm sure Mark, I don't know if you want to just come in on that, because I know there's been a lot of work, initial work, to try and raise the profile of the industry.
Yeah, absolutely.
Please take it so that everybody...
Yeah, no, fine. Okay. No, we have, as Judy said, we have one of the asset groups is actually a tourism skills group. It's led by Ian Whitaker up from Cairngorm Mountain, who won the Thistle Award for Skills Development. But it's very much done in partnership with Skills Development Scotland, People First, flow training, all the real principles there. Springboard, Hans touched on HIT Scotland, who I think last year just delivered their 1000th scholarship to the industry, to the emerging talents of the industry. The biggest challenge, though, is to raise the profile of the sector, to actually make the tourism industry be seen to be a career of choice. We are the old, have the sort of baggage on the back of being, yes, poorly paid, working 25 hours a day, 7 days a week, getting flogged by a chef. The sector is really broad. It offers so many different opportunities and experiences as a whole. That is the message that's not getting through at grassroots level. It's not getting, spoken about in the same way in the schools, the primary school, secondary school, etc. So certainly there is initiatives, campaigns with Springboard and as I say, SDS and various other working groups, but it's also down to the industry to take some ownership of actually conveying the positives about the opportunities that lie within. And when you come and work in an establishment like this, or you're part of a big professional event, and we are getting bigger and better at everything we do, why wouldn't you want to work in this industry? And it is paying better, but we are the ones that can make that change. And with the skills group and with the collective voice of all the different asset groups as well, showcasing the opportunities around each of those strands, then it rests with us. And pay, yes, will come with it, but attitude, as well as understanding the future generation of what their expectations are as well of us as an employer, because their behaviour types, for any of you who attended our National Tourism Conference in March, would have been very much reminded of by Dr. Paul Redmond. We have to adapt to the future behaviour of the millennial, as well as not just trying to clone them into our dinosaur era of learning as it was when we did. So that would be my view. And I would say, I was going to ask the question as what do you see as being the biggest challenge for business tourism? And personally, I see still people as being that challenge, but not about the fact that there aren't enough of them. I think it's enough that the fact that we don't do enough ourselves to actually attract them into the sector itself, and we need to be doing more of that.
I'm relatively new to this, so I can speak a bit dispassionately about it and look at it from the outside. I'm totally on your team. I always thought, until I got involved in it, that tourism, for want of a better title, people who worked in tourism, it wasn't ever seen with the degree of credibility it should have been. It was, why do you really want to work in that? One, because it's not massively well respected, genuinely, whether you like it or not. It's the outside view. I think that view's changed incredibly much. But it's not very well paid, and you work too hard. And there's a whole bunch of anecdotal reasons about why that's the case. And standards, sometimes, in a personal experience, and anecdotal, I'm sure you've all got them, of the hotels at 2:30 closing when there's a bus there turning up hungry, and they'll close at 2:30. I think the industry doesn't do yourself a whole load of favours either in how it promotes itself, how it actually comes together to attract young people. And is it a more attractive proposition for the youth of today? I don't know that yet. I don't really hear it in my sons or all their friends. I don't hear anyone saying, do you know what, Dad, I want to go work in tourism. At the moment, it's I want to be a fund manager because of Wolf of Wall Street, billionaires. It's much more interesting. I think there's a job to be done. I think having been exposed to it now for a little bit, I think the standards are very good across it. You're always going to make standards. The whole point is an industry is a body. Like all industries, nobody should be improving those standards across the piece from the way in which people are educated, how they're trained in the job, how they're mentored by people like you, is the way they'll improve. And that's a relative newcomer's view.
I think an interesting point is across our, at Edinburgh Napier, across our degree and master's programmes, we have a unit in business tourism or conference management or whatever the title is. But a lot of the students, I think it's very enlightening tonight in terms of they really don't understand the value of business tourism and the opportunities within it. And still, I think a lot of graduates don't necessarily see business tourism as a career path going forward. They still want to work at the music festivals, they still want to work for the festivals, or they want to go into more mainstream tour operators, travel. So I think there is maybe a promotional opportunity there for the industry to try and educate, particularly graduates, in terms of the opportunities and the value of that sector within events and also within tourism. And actually, speaking of that, Aaron, who's one of our students, did you have a question?
No pressure there. Hello, Aaron McKee, Edinburgh Napier student and actually a casual employee here at EICC. The talks are all great tonight. They're actually of particular interest to me because I've just been doing a bit of research on economic impact and beyond that of business tourism and particularly conferences. I would like to hear it, heard it before, I had it in my dissertation, but never mind. But some cities such as Seoul and Durban and London have been investing in, I believe it's called FCCI, which is the Future Conference Cities Initiative, and that's to look at the beyond tourism impacts of the conference industry in terms of, social factors and network building and so forth. How is Edinburgh going to go forward? Is there anything planned in this sort of vein for the city of Edinburgh? Is there anything else? And perhaps we could hear a little bit more about the the Think Scotland, Think Conferences initiative you mentioned earlier on. Thanks.
I've got to touch on the Edinburgh piece. It's not as joined up as it should be. You can say that from nothing. That's not just in business tourism. There's not a brand, for example, for the city there is compared to other cities. So that's what puts it in the back foot to begin with. I'm aware of the initiatives you're talking about. Edinburgh's not really put too much into that at the moment. We are, however, as a body, involved with all those organisations. Because back to one of the things I was saying earlier is around, again, being relatively new to this, it's very disparate organisations. There's no go-to organisation who's going to pull all that together and pull all the cities together. We as Edinburgh are a member of the Best Cities Alliance, which is top 10 best cities in their view in the world. So we use a lot of that to help drive what we do. We have board meetings, we have thought leadership programmes, we meet regularly, we share best practice. So again, but that's only 10 cities. And the two of the three you mentioned aren't in it, and they probably should be. It's a paid membership, that's why people think they're best. So I think, to your point, yes, we are involved, but not in that particular programme, but in other programmes that help drive our standards.
And picking up on the Think Scotland, Think Conference initiative, what it is currently, particularly Glasgow Edinburgh, and I'm not sure whether you do it in Aberdeen, Steve, there is an academic ambassadors programme whereby the convention bureaus, the city convention bureaus, work with the universities, talking to either heads of department or professors who may be the head of a particular association or the chair of that particular association. And that's a natural partnership between the city convention bureau and the academic of the time. And they can work together at putting a destination bid and bringing that particular subject into hopefully the city. That can be done quite happily individually, city to city and academics to academics. The challenge is that business tourism, as you saw on my slide, there is the conferences, but there's also the corporate meetings, which very much where the Science Centre works, and we don't have facilities to take the big academic type association businesses. But there's a very lucrative corporate market in terms of corporate businesses that operate, have actually sometimes larger budgets, maybe a bit more volatile in terms of what they can and can't do because it may be market dependent. Classic, when the downturn happened, some of the corporate meetings within Scotland, and I'm not sure whether it happened with you, Hans, particularly the financial business sector, absolutely died because people could not be seen to be having conferences. However, when it becomes more positive, and the flip side to that is they all do communicate at conferences, they all do communicate sometimes overseas. These are individuals who are, we want to identify who they are, B, they are hopefully going to champion events and business tourism in Scotland and how they can actually influence the decisions to come to Scotland for the conference. So what we are trying to do from the group's perspective is to put together an offer and a route to market that allows them to lever through it will be based at the Visit Scotland Business Tourism website, an opportunity to bid for conferences with the support of the various cities. So it's quite exciting because it's a national initiative. And as individuals, say the Science Centre, we couldn't perhaps go to, say, Microsoft independently and say, we know there's a particular Scot who's working within that area, could he bring that conference to Scotland? But if there was a national initiative, there may be more reason for them to do that. So that's what that initiative is all about. And it's a very exciting thing because we'll work with Global Scots, SCDI, some of the key players that actually lead in that type of introduction in a way that the city bureaus couldn't do independently. Is that helpful?
That's very good.
Ken?
Yes, Kenneth Wardrop, freelance tourism consultant and visiting research fellow in School of Marketing and Tourism Languages at Edinburgh University. My question is about the target for growth and the points that John was making about the challenges in those three areas of a sort of level playing field or competitive position in terms of the taxation, VAT, air passenger duty, subvention fund, and sort of proper investment in tourism. So, you know, if we're actually going to reach that target, is there a piece of work that's been done to say, if we actually crack those things, how does that take us to get to the target, and how do we actually influence government to actually make those decisions in terms of giving us that sort of competitive position and advantage and start investing in things like subvention funds. So, you know, it's a kind of question between Judy and John, I guess, and Judy's ambition in terms of growth. You know, is it an inhibiting factor? You're never actually going to get over that unless you actually crack these things in terms of competitive position.
It's got a broad range question, and there's a lot in that. Trying to cut through it, I think to the point, yeah, there is. There's a lot of thought, a lot of conversation going on. Whilst those are challenges, I think the biggest challenge actually for Edinburgh wasn't actually put on that slide, which is joined up thinking, which I don't think exists here when it goes to market as a city to win business conferences. I think it can be much slicker about how it targets conferences, when it targets them to come. That's, for example, shoulder months. Why are we trying to bring in, waste time, money and effort, try to bring a conference in here in the summer? Why bother? So let's target it when not that does work. It works for the hoteliers better as well. It works for the conferences from a rate point of view. So I think not just, there's some areas in there that we will not be able to affect other than through lobbying. Things like APD, which you see at Edinburgh Airport, through Gordon Judy, quite a lot of lobbying around that. We do lobbying through our contacts at the government. But you can lobby till you're blue in the face. There's other things that we can address. The key thing is being tight around how we go to market. I've viewed it in other cities that I've went to visit. I mean, you go and look to people like, say, Amsterdam, where I think are probably the exemplar of how they actually go to market to win conferences. When they go as one. They've got their major venue, they've got their airline, they've got their airport, they've got the hoteliers, all pushing together. Not just that, they go in a very creative way. I think we're having a very hard look at the bid documentation that we put in, because I think, maybe because of my background, I don't think it's as creative as it should be. I don't think the proposition is as strong as it could be. So there's lots of stuff that we can actually do to be more effective, even without changing areas. It may take a few years to change.
And I was really kind of building on from, John's spoken about it from a destination perspective. We're just looking at it from a national perspective, and a lot of the similarities and challenges in terms of growth that have been articulated from Edinburgh's perspective, to be blunt, is the same as from a national perspective. So I don't think there's any, distinct differences or other kind of key routes to market that haven't already been explored, and where the industry group, where we hope will be able to add, not necessarily greater value, but just additional weight, is that it's a collective amongst the whole of Scotland. It's not just Edinburgh saying it, or Glasgow saying it, or Aberdeen or Dundee, or say that it is a collective thing, because it's based on audited information and feedback from who is currently operating within Scotland. So therefore, they're at the coalface of knowing what your customers are looking for, what the challenges they face coming into Scotland. Is it connectivity? Is it the skills situation? What is it? And once we have that information, that will then allow us to make informed decisions of what those KPIs are and need to be to grow it.
So just to embellish that one last point. In order to get a conference into a city, you all know this better, right? It's aligning planets. There's a lot of moving parts that need to come together. When you make that pitch, that first pitch, it's all together, and it's getting that understood. Things, you mentioned the word connectivity there, Edinburgh, by driving its business now, because it's privately owned. There's a real desire and will by the senior management to get equity stakes in that business now to drive it. And that's only good for everyone, because all that does is drive more rail routes, which is only helping hotels, which only helps open up other markets that we can sell the conference proposition. So it's just aligning all of these things together and doing it well when we do it.
Edinburgh is in a lucky position. Edinburgh needs to be marketed much more aggressively for the shoulder months. And shoulder months, I'm talking about October, November, December, January, February, March. If you add them together, and sometimes it's April, that's the majority of the year. Edinburgh will always automatically fill during the summer months. It doesn't need a special efforts to bring business as far as tourism is concerned, be it international associations or corporate, during the summer months. So our efforts should be geared towards seasonality. Now, when we found here at the EICC that we have helped to cut these shoulder months
especially during September, October, November, and beginning of December down. What we're now looking at is the second part of December. We're looking at January, February, March. These are the shoulder months where we need business. And where Edinburgh cannot afford to turn business away. Like we recently had a corporate client who wanted to come in January 2015 with 850 people requiring 750 bedrooms. And we lost it. Another aspect, not every client, not every international association, or not every corporate is looking for a subsidy or a subvention. There's too much concentration at the moment at subventions. How much we have to give clients in order to come here. Now, if we have to pay clients to come here, we're going down a spiral, losing money. There are plenty of clients who are still happy to pay in the shoulder months to come here to Edinburgh. And Edinburgh is an easy destination to sell. There is no resistance factor in the 20 years of experience we have had here at the EICC towards the suggestion, let's have our conference in Edinburgh. Yes, everybody is very positive about Edinburgh. It's the image, it's not battling like Glasgow, which has to discount a hell of a lot during the show, especially during the shoulder months, in order to get business. No offense to you, it's a fact of life. So, to attract conferences, I signed this morning a contract for one client where the room hire is alone £200,000 for the whole of the expanded EICC. For July 2016, we are now signing, and a young lady who has been working on it for that particular contract has been working on that client for 2 years. And there's lots and lots of influencing factors, as John alluded to make that decision to come here. It takes an ambitious president, an ambitious board, it takes lots of other influencing factors, which are all very, very positive for Edinburgh. And that is what we need to sell, you know, that extra value and unite our tourism industry in Scotland to come under one umbrella and not found yet again another organisation where we have already 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 organisations all driving towards the same goals, i.e. more business and targets. We have to have targets. If we achieve them, that's the second question. Yeah? Well, we have to have targets. We have to set targets. And you touched on it. The action towards that mission statement, the targets and the business plan is what is important. What are we doing about it? Are we still talking about it? How are we going to get there?
Okay, I'm conscious of time, and there will be opportunity to carry on networking in the room next door where there's drinks and nibbles available. So before we move next door, I'd like to offer some thanks. First of all to Hans and all at the EICC for hosting us this evening. Next to our inspiring speakers, to John, to Judy and to Hans. And then finally to all of you for supporting SEFA this evening, for coming here tonight. And then also to Gail, Hodge and Shona Darling from the SEFA board for pulling together tonight's event so professionally. So a big thank you again. I think this was a really interesting discussion, and I know I've certainly learned a lot about the value of business tourism in Edinburgh and Scotland, and I think we're in a very, very strong position to take that forward. Also, so we look forward to seeing you at the next SEFA event. If you're not already a member, please join. And next time we're looking at something which is totally different. So we're looking at how to deal with people in crowded spaces. And we're going to be repeating our successful 2-day crowd management programme, which we run in collaboration with the Scottish Police College, and that's at the end of May. So if we don't see you then, hopefully we'll see you next time, but please do go next door and join us for some networking, drinks and refreshments. So thank you everybody.